Okay, call to order the meeting of the Groton Resiliency and Sustainability Task Force. It's 4 o'clock, 4:02. And we have Jesse Stratton and Sarah Kelly and Frank Boland and Maggie Jones and myself and Megan Martato. So we approval of the minutes. I think Jesse sent you out those minutes.
I motion we approve the minutes. Frank, what do you think?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
All right.
Aye, okay, good. We got that over with. Okay, have we got anybody on the waiting room?
Oh, we bamboozled the public by going to 4 o'clock.
Maybe.
No, we are the only ones here as far as I can tell.
Okay, good. Well, so by way of explaining what I've done this month is that part of our goal is to shift to having Megan being a key part of the town and doing resiliency and sustainability. And so I sat down with her a week ago and we had a good cup of tea and asked her what she would like to have brought for the task force. And so Megan gave me the list of the 3 items that are on there. There's more, but I think we can handle 3 at this time. And I'm really excited. And so Megan, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you go from here.
Okay, great. I did put together some slides. So I'm sorry for the reconfiguration. Am
I blocking anybody else now?
No.
Screen sharing. Big and put it in
Ah,
the recording.
full screen, man, that's terrific.
Yeah, here's how this works, right? So yeah, just a couple of slides because there's lots of details, lots of moving pieces, but I'll talk through all of it, so don't feel like you have to read. And my apologies, I did not make it pretty. Your black and white got the job done.
There's blue in there.
There, yes, I did try to put program links in just in case anyone was interested in any of the programs I'm talking about. I can email slides and then the links are embedded. So the first thing we put on the agenda for new business item A was extreme heat in Groton and the proposal for a University of New Hampshire summer fellow. So
It's UNH, not New Haven, right?
right, yeah, no, University of New Hampshire. It was perfect timing because Frank came in with this article about how heat is the #1 cause of mortality for climate-related impacts, way above flooding. Might be surprising. I was surprised when I heard that statistic for the first time, but there is sort of a growing movement in talking about heat impacts. I know it's something that you all had in your reporting that you had done. There's more resources out there. The federal government launched heat.gov recently. So I think there's a lot to do, and there's a lot that we could fold into the town's climate work and climate planning focused on heat. So University of New Hampshire Sustainability Institute, so UNHSI, has this fellowship program. It's certainly not new. I don't know how long it's been around. But they really have it down. It's a really solid program where they kind of matchmake organizations looking for students to do really concentrated resiliency projects, and then students who are interested in doing that work. So the first step in this process each year is that host organizations apply. So they bring their project ideas to UNH. Host organizations can be local governments like us, but also for-profit businesses, nonprofits, educational groups. And if you're successful in getting your proposal accepted, it's a 12-week program over the summer. And you can actually select whether or not you prefer an undergraduate student, in which case the undergraduate students all come from UNH, or you can request a graduate student, which is a nationwide search. I guess anyone from, colleges outside of UNH are allowed to apply. So for example, we could have UConn students apply through this program. We actually have participated in this before. Rick Norris had a fellow back in 2018 that helped with an energy benchmarking update. So in terms of timeline, and I'm going to talk about what we're actually hoping the fellow will do on the next slide, but just sort of give you an overview of the process and where we are with it. Host proposals were due for early consideration on October 14th. I submitted ours yesterday, so it would be part of that first set they're being taken a look at. I think proposals can be submitted up through November 4th. We should hear if our proposal is successful by the end of November. Once they have the group of projects that they're interested in supporting, then they do the search for the actual students. So the students apply in a process between December and March. They have to do a written application, and then there's actually interviews. If we were selected to move forward, we would get to interview the students to find the right fit for us. Selections get announced April 1st, and then over the spring, we would be working with UNH on putting together the detailed work plan of exactly what the student would be doing over the course of the summer with us. So they really provide a lot of assistance in that way, which I think is really terrific. So the proposal that we just submitted did request a graduate student to focus on the impacts of extreme heat in Groton, and help us develop strategies to reduce those impacts. So we have some flexibility in the work plan, but we definitely want the fellow to start their time with us by really just learning about this issue, right? I don't know that this fellow will come in having really any understanding about heat impacts. So we need to give them time to do some of that research.
Can I interrupt you?
Absolutely.
For a question. So this would be a perfect one. I'm sure you're already way ahead and thinking about this, to work with the Ledgelight Health District on.
Yeah.
Because they have a plan and they have this pulled together. And so getting that, them and figuring out the different things that are already in place, and then what more could be done. Might be a focus.
To interrupt that I think, Sarah, Megan has already met with
Oh, good.
Ledgelight with Victor.
Oh, good.
And so there has been, and go ahead, because I think I'm jumping into your turf.
Victor and I met with Chris Magnuson, who is the head for communicable disease prevention at Ledgelight last week or the week before. Had a really great conversation where she gave me an orientation to a lot of the work that Ledgelight does. I let her know that we were applying for this fellow and asked her sort of really like if she had her dream list of what towns like Groton would do to help prepare for heat or understand about heat, what would that be? Like, what are some of the gaps in the programming? And so I'll put an asterisk on that for the next slide.
Oh, great.
But I did ask her also if we could keep the communication going, if we were to get a fellow, if I could connect her with them. And she said, absolutely,
Perfect.
which is great.
Yeah, that's great.
One other point is that Sarah worked with Victor, or the two of them worked together on health issues with Ledgelight. So she's got there's a person there who's
It almost sounds though, now realize the source. This has been done.
Like,
It almost sounds like this has been done, and the place for the intern is the next step.
if I could get to the next slide. Right,
Of course.
understood completely. The initial sort of assessment of it has been done.
Yeah.
The student has to learn that though. Right, so we
Right.
have tools and resources we can give them, we have
Sure.
connections we can make,
Sure.
but we have to give them some time to get that under their
Sure.
belt. That's pretty much the point of this
Right,
bullet.
right.
And I think that there is, there's always more we can do to learn about as other local governments are taking this on. There might be new
Yeah.
examples
Right.
of things that would be of interest to them. So from there, we put in some potential ideas into the work plan. I did have a conversation with the fellowship coordinator to ask a question of like, really how nailed down do we have to be versus how much flexibility can we leave? And she said, really, some flexibility is definitely okay. And being able to tailor it to the intern is a good thing. So we outlined some ideas of the types of work we thought the intern could possibly help us with. And it's kind of varied, and it might be that as we develop the work plan, we decide that they help us with a few of these things. Maybe we add in new ideas that we didn't have at this point in time. But some preliminary ideas were studying art-built environment, understanding areas of concentrated impervious surface, areas that don't have green infrastructure, trying to figure out sort of where those hotspots are around town. Another idea was really trying to do community work, perhaps within the Midway Oval, the Quaquonic Bridge neighborhood, to help connect residents and building owners with existing financial incentives for doing heat pumps or things of that nature. Even just honestly starting that dialogue at the community level about what the problem is and what the exposure is, I think would be really helpful for us identifying potential ways that we could move forward. The last one is something that Chris brought up. So this was my asterisk from a moment ago. When I asked her that question of what she wished a town like Groton would do, she was like, we every summer get phone calls from people who are homebound, who don't have air conditioning. And on really hot days, they are having difficulty breathing. How do you get services to a community like that? So even just learning about what that population is within Groton and helping to try to think of, working with Ledge Light, are there ways that we could connect them to resources to help during those high heat emergency days? That could be something that we could dig in on. So this list is not exhaustive, but to Frank, your earlier point, we want to definitely do things that have not been done, moving past just a basic understanding of what the issue is.
Sure. The other thing to keep in mind, I think that you will find, if you wandered around town, that there's a significant percentage of houses, particularly some of the older folks, the longer term residents here, that don't have air conditioning. You didn't need it. You opened the windows here in New England, you didn't need it. And any number of friends can tell you that within the last 5 years, we put in air conditioning. So there's a surprising number of houses through the town that don't have air conditioning. And that, of course, now you look at the lower income groupings here and there, that may be more extreme. And this homebound issue is a very interesting one. It's just
Well,
the nature of the community you're dealing with.
It suggests that the older people are probably a good part of that group.
They're older and infirm or disabled.
And of course, what happens is you get older. And
What do you know?
you find that you're in the house more than you were, and it's
Yeah.
hot. So it's not by design, it's just the way things are, you get older.
Will there be any sort of looking at humidity versus actual temperature to sort of get the heat index kind of issue?
Yeah, the heat index is very important.
I think that fits into that
That fits in that whole.
first bullet,
Okay,
of like
okay,
really
good,
understanding.
good.
That's a good point.
Yeah, and there are gonna be other some bullets, under these things, right? Because like one big issue is people getting dehydrated.
Right.
And making sure you have hydration stations and for people who are housebound, that they're drinking enough fluids. And
Right.
how they. keep track
I mean,
of
this
it.
summer was a good example. There weren't that many 95-degree days, but it was very, very uncomfortable for a bike rider because of the humidity.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. So I mean, the heat
Yeah,
index does
July
become
and August were pretty hot here.
or sailing.
Yeah.
Well, I think in that first bullet point too, it's not even just getting the fellow to really understand the problem. It's helping distill some of that messaging in a way that you all did, but making sure that we have sort of like, this is how you communicate heat, right? It's not just 95-degree days, it's
Uh-huh.
also humidity, right? Like
Yeah.
trying to bring in.
You have an element in that has education.
What's that?
You have an element in there that speaks to education. You could have the grad student or whatever it is could be giving some lectures here and there,
Yeah.
something like that. They might add that in.
The other thing that occurs to me, that what happens with the very hot, humid periods is that those typically tend to be the air quality alert days. And would that be sort of part of that? Is that, I mean, it's not heat directly there, it's the secondary effect of having the heat, and then
Right.
all the pollutants that are associated with it then really makes it pretty, or can make it pretty lethal for people who've got problems.
I think so.
Okay.
Any other kind of questions on where we're going on this?
So,
Pretty clear. The 2018 study might come up again, right? If I was part of the group up there, I might look to see what you have done, or they have done, or we have done. What was done with that 2018 benchmarking study?
We put it in our report to say the things that had actually, because she found things that had increased in terms of usage over the initial recommendations of the first report,
Or-
but was to say that those should be prioritized in terms of efficiency and investments. at
So it's
this
being
point.
brought into plan.
So it was in what we put together
Right.
from that. So I don't know what has happened since 2018 when she did that, but it was actually very helpful. And one of your pet peeves, the lighting on ball fields and stuff.
yes,
So many pet peeves, and planting trees, presumably that's a big one.
shade,
Shade and cooling on trees.
When you
Big one.
take that ash down, you're replacing it with something that's not susceptible.
I have to talk to you about that from offline.
And there is funding available. I don't know if Groton is working with Breeze Line, the folks that bought Ames Valley, and
Yeah.
they were going, they starting and got a really nice grant. I just had to write it in 10 minutes, and they deposited a big fat check to buy and plant trees. And they're looking to work with municipalities, and I know they approached Groton. I don't know what happened.
Good. Okay, so the other thing, the question I asked Megan is, so this isn't free, and how would this be funded, given that we're halfway through our budget season, this cycle? So can you talk to that, to the group about that?
Sure. So for a graduate student, the required cost matching on behalf of the town, in this case, is $9,500. UNH provides out of their budget, the funding for the entire process. They do a number of events with the students over the course of the summer and all of that kind of thing to keep the program up and running. So there are funds available for the town within the planning department budget to support this.
Is there also a link to, I think it's the chief of police that ends up being the emergency coordinator, planner, and the fire departments and all that?
I would think so. I mean, how
Because
do
the
we,
fire departments were supposed to be heat. Can't remember what they called them, but there's a term for it, like
Cooling stations.
maybe just cooling station or emergency station or whatever it was.
All right.
there's
I'm sitting here thinking like, I wonder if one of the things that happens in something like this is more people go to the library. Because the library's got air conditioning and whether, yeah, exactly. And whether you need to kind of flex, to having an energy load in certain places so that they're kept cool and there's water there and there are services.
An evacuation center.
Yeah.
Also, I mean, we talk about
Right.
hurricanes, but what about a heat emergency? We're not gonna put air conditioning through the whole town, but for some number of folks, they may have to go to a shelter. And what do we have in the way of shelter considerations right now? We have a sense that they may have that because we've spoken with the police chief, the emergency manager. but I don't know.
I believe Ledge Lay also administers that part of that program.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because she spoke right about cooling
Together.
station in town, yeah. But then there's that, like, I've read a little bit about even the best ways to set up cooling stations in terms of access, in
Right.
terms of how you communicate to people where those cooling stations are, how do you transport those people to the cooling stations? And that's sort of how we got to the conversation about when people that can't leave their homes, what do you do?
So I guess the only addition I'd put to that bullet would be explicitly saying this would be accompanied by an educational effort, and we don't have to define that right so on, but the task force, I think, would be particularly interested in taking this and then really trying to provide the whole town with as an educational opportunity.
Mhm.
Because my sense is that when this was done with the energy stuff, that did not happen. Last time an NIH, UNH student was here. And yeah, yeah. And I guess the other part of that would be and I'm a little sensitive to this today because I've got a 245-page document sitting in front of me, a very short little written summary so that we can say to the town council or to the whole staff, here's what happened. But that's very short.
Yeah, I mean, great idea and great plan, and I think one that's
Yeah.
very pertinent to the area and to what's going on in this area.
And it's,
Well, I think the other thing is, I don't think a lot of people realize that.
Yeah,
The
Right.
pertinence to it.
Yeah,
That's
relevant.
The heat pump
I don't-
thing, as is often the case, we don't have things that fit nicely into silos. And the heat pump obviously also raises heat issues for the winter, the opposite thing. And in particular, most of the programs that are available through our utilities and those programs, again, I don't know where Groton Utilities sits on this, but all require energy audits before those things happen. And particularly with that Paquonic area neighborhood, to just stick heat pumps in is just say, okay, let's just suck power off the grid to cool places that need to be insulated and all that kind of stuff.
The ball of yarn that quickly starts
Yes,
to unravel.
precisely.
Mhm.
But if one is working in those homes, it makes sense to try to do the other things. And for certain demographics, those are all free. So those that are in the Eversource territory.
Back to one of the things we talked about the other day, somewhere, may have been circa somewhere, but City of Groton. You can coordinate some of this with the City of Groton. We were talking about distressed cities or whatever we talked about, and we are a distressed city. I can't believe it. But of course, that comes in part because of Navy housing problem. And to what extent does the Navy take care of all this? Are all those houses air conditioned?
Right.
And I think the Navy is probably, they may or may
Several
not be,
steps
but they're
ahead
pretty,
of us.
pretty on top of the subject. How bad. So,
I think the answer, Frank, I think this wouldn't cover, as I understand it, the city because,
coordination with the city.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about doing their job.
Yeah.
Saying
but because the emergency management
is
townwide.
It's townwide.
Yeah.
I think.
I mean, yeah, it is.
I think our police chief is it for the town.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so coordination with the city might be an important part of it.
I did have a first meeting with Sierra Patrick at the city, which was great. And we talked about, keeping each other in the loop. We've already exchanged a number of emails.
Good.
Yeah, keeping that conversation going and seeing opportunities to coordinate.
Wow.
All right,
Let's go.
B,
let's do B. All right, B's the big one. So several of you, I know are already aware, Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection has a brand new grant opportunity. So that's the focus of item B here. It's called the Climate Resilience Fund. It is currently open for proposals. This is its first year. It was established after being recommended in the Governor's Council on Climate Change report in 2021. So it's really, really all brand new. There's $10 million available for this first year of funding. It's all focused on climate planning and project development. They have the request for proposal split into 2 different tracks, which I'll describe in a moment. And 40% or more of the funds must be targeted to what they have defined as vulnerable communities, of which the town of Groton is one. So in that way, we have a bit of a leg up in terms of competition.
What do they mean when they talk about that vulnerability? That's social.
So they have,
That social vulnerability index.
Isn't it?
yes, so they don't use, I don't think they use the civvy. They do have, but you're correct. It's one of the indices they're looking at is based on income, and the other, I think, factors in income and a couple of other social demographics. So track 1 is for planning projects, sort of large scale planning projects. They anticipate that each award will be about $100,000 to $200,000. So to give you an idea of the magnitude of what they're looking for, they're prioritizing proposals that have stakeholder-driven processes and a lot of community collaboration. A couple of things they're requiring of the projects to be funded is that they include vulnerability assessment, at least 3 public meetings. You must also perform a municipal match funding assessments. And they want everyone to consider co-benefits and green infrastructure approaches. And then track 2 is project development. So once you have a targeted need at a specific location, these are funds to help scope out that project, develop and design it. Funding is not available for construction, but essentially everything you need to get your project shovel ready. And they are really trying to encourage folks. You have to be thinking about the funds available for implementation through the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act, through the Inflation Reduction Act, other federal programs and state programs that already exist. You actually have to include a narrative if you were to get funding under this track as one of your final deliverables, essentially like part of the grant proposal you're going to submit to one of those sources for implementation. So eligible things include nature-based solutions, green infrastructure, flood prevention, climate resilience and erosion control systems, as well as great infrastructure. And one of the important flags is that projects need to have been identified in a prior planning process. So they want there to be a context and a history there in terms of why the projects are important to the community.
Infrastructure.
Gray infrastructure is like your existing stormwater system, so
Oh,
your
okay.
pipes, your culverts.
Okay.
Ideal projects are going to be green or green-gray hybrids. So that's kind of what they're more interested in funding. And a little bit of the list of fundable activities include project scoping, site studies and selection, project design, engineering assessments, H&H studies, benefit cost analyses, those sorts of things. So again, really trying to help folks get a project from concept all the way through ready to construct. So what does that mean for us? I am planning and have received support internally to submit proposals to both tracks. I have also asked Deep and had it confirmed that yes, that is allowed. You can submit more than one, and you can submit one to each track. The track 1 proposal we'll put together is going to request funding to support the climate action plan I mentioned at the previous meeting. And then I would like to develop a track 2 proposal that would help us understand and try to figure out ways to address flooding at Paquonic Plains Park. So I'll go in a little bit more detail on each of those. Although Jesse's smiling, and I don't know if that's a good smile or a bad smile. So I guess I'm going to
Go ahead.
So track 1 is the climate action plan. And at this point, honestly, I have more questions than answers, but really want to go big with this. We already have some money identified in the previous budget for the climate action plan. So this would be funds to help us expand what we want to do. I really want to push for representation from across the town governments. And I think that the resolution that was passed in 2021 is a perfect, part of the justification as to why that's so important. And of course, there'll be external partners involved. Really want to do extensive community engagement, put together a communication strategy for how we're going to organize that, and also show people how we're using the information and the time that they provide us. We're talking about starting the entire process with a community resilience building workshop from the Nature Conservancy. I want to make it clear that we are not starting from scratch. There has been a ton of work done to date. And one of the things that I have been working on is kind of putting together that compilation of things that have been done so that when we hire a contractor to assist us, they are provided that. So they kind of have that baseline of where we currently are. And this would be the perfect example of yet another way we can incorporate the work of UNH fellow if we are successful in getting that fellow.
Just by way of caution, I'm concerned about TNC.
Okay.
Just so you know.
Let me
What?
go through the slides and we'll get
Nature
back to that.
Conservancy.
Had some less than.
I
Yeah,
get sick looking at it.
huh?
I get sick looking at it.
I know. So just,
I guess a question, which you have met over at Circa, correct?
Yes.
Because they conduct that kind of thing too. So it might be just worth sort of talking again with, I'm not sure whether it's Katie or whether it's somebody else, to sort of say, to what extent do you think you could help the town? Because they certainly help towns in Fairfield County and New Haven County. And whether they'd have the ability to do that.
Well, they're working specifically, I think they told you that, with this area now. So-
Right, so that's, I mean, they got the strings off because they've got more money.
And they
so-
got a Mystic River model going and new projects going, so there's a lot more down here.
So I guess on that note, I'm curious to hear your input. My interest in TNC, right, is that this is a process they have done with many other communities, and it starts a conversation. The product that comes out of it is not the end all be all. That's what I said, we would start with that, but then we would take the results of that conversation and build out the entire plan. So
Why
I
do we
really
need the Nature
saw,
Conservancy
Yeah.
involved in it at all?
my response to that would be subject matter expertise, experience doing this with many other communities, and having that framework.
The second
in
is
place.
true, the first is limited.
And I think that's probably where, and I have
My
enormous
experience of
enormous respect for TNC nationally. We've had less than stellar results with some of Connecticut TNC. And so you just should be aware of
Yeah,
that.
I appreciate that.
going into it. I think the conversation process is something that they're pretty good at. But the expertise, I think many of us would question.
So are you suggesting Circa?
If Circa
By
is able,
topic anyway,
Yeah,
if Circa is able to do it, and it might be even a combination, but
yeah, and if what you really need is professional facilitation of these kinds of meetings. That's what I did for 10 years at my last job at Hampshire. So I know a little bit about who might be available to help you nationally. I mean, if you really want to get into the how to do this really, really well. It's not cheap, but
Yeah.
so,
Something to consider. I mean, we're not wedded at this point to any one approach.
okay.
I've had a preliminary email with TNC to gauge their interest, but we've not committed to anything.
Yeah.
So now would be a good time to, now is the right time to be having this conversation if there's other
It's interesting to
alternatives.
think about based on our inventory that we did and all the discussions of sort of what's in great shape, what would you focus on in terms of infrastructure? And I would think, we talked about before that the sewer and water systems happen to have been invested in and are in pretty great shape. mean, at least the sewer plant
Well, the
is.
sewer plant, and that's true, but what's not,
But what's interesting is the storm, water infrastructure.
Mhm.
That one's probably a huge one. for our
it's a huge one, and it's not been well managed in this community.
So,
And what's interesting about
and
this,
then the electrification.
And you might be
and
interested
so
in
on.
finding out why. I mean, you see, it has to a point. When we first came here in 1970, the Long Hill down to the corner there, Shinnecock Road, I guess, whatever it is, the Conic Road or Shinnecock, the Conic Road was regularly flooded. Anytime it rained, you couldn't drive under that bridge. That's corrected. But in 2010, we saw just how much remains to be done in terms of extreme events. There's a lot of reasons why not much has been done on that, mainly dollars. Or if you talk to Hanover, it may be dollars and manpower. And so there are things that are going on that have been going on, but need to go further. So to say that it hasn't been done is
Yeah, that one's a really interesting one.
And-
and it's a toughie. Because it's cost. You gotta look at the capacity.
when Megan first mentioned this to me, I pretty find this very interesting, because what you've got is you've got a relatively small watershed, which has been pretty highly disturbed in a good portion of it. This goes up to 95 and above 95, goes into a place right below 95, which is where the data center was being proposed, which is a mess. And it goes down through a spectacular section of the sheep farm with all those waterfalls and pretty untouched property. Then you get into the ball fields, and you've got a mess with the drainage there, and then you've got and then you've got the addition of now two, and actually three schools now that drain down there, and God knows what comes out the other end.
Well, you gotta be careful. I just had a thought. You gotta be careful about Plains because you may want it to flood when it freezes. Because we're gonna make a hell of a skating rink out there. you see?
Yeah, so this last slide is still about the climate action plan, but it sounds like everyone's read it. So the gist of this, right, is if we're successful in this proposal, if we request a significant amount of money, I'm hoping that we could do sort of a deeper dive into some of these planning needs, to triage and figure out which of these rise to the top, or if there's other ones, but things that I have been thinking of that could be of interest, I listed out here. End of the day, I want to get a really actionable final product with an accountability framework built in that shows exactly what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, when we're going to do it, and with what funds and who's
And you set priorities.
prioritized.
Yeah, that's great.
And what's nice about this kind of approach is that you then can include what's likely to happen with the change in design storms. Is the 100-year storm really the 100-year storm still? And
Right.
do we need to modify those in order to account for?
Right.
So it really does fall.
Yeah, are you saying at what point do we pivot and design to 500 year? On a more routine basis, and
I think Public Works, when we met with them about sort of complying with the MS4 permits and stuff, that was very much a question on their part, sort of like, what is it that we're designing for? I mean,
Where does Aquatic Plains Park have equally complex flooding issues?
It's facing that corner. The
No,
south.
the park, the
my
ball
interest-
field, I'm sorry, you're talking about the ball
Yeah.
field.
Yeah.
Not the housing center. Okay.
sort of how will that be impacted
talking
when
about-
that school comes down too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Becomes an interesting question.
And we don't know how that's
Right.
gonna,
What's-
although your daughter worked on that project.
I get it. Yeah, some of them.
when the
The one on the
school,
corner where
The new,
you guys all play football in the geese coop.
you know,
scoop school.
the
I
goose
just,
poop.
I watch them out there and I just go,
Take a shower when you get home.
You stink.
In terms of flooding though, just now, all this looks great. And.
Yeah, I think this is great.
And perfectly reasonable. But if I had a buck to spend, I might look pretty carefully at Aquatic Plains Park that was nothing until 10 years ago, 15 years ago, pick a number. I shouldn't say nothing. It was simply an ecosystem. And the backside of a housing development. And then they cleared it out and they made it into a ball field. Pick a name. That's great. And so now every now and then some portion of it floods. So what? It's not a regularly, I will say this now without too much, I can stand criticism. It's not part of the athletic facilities or schools. It's for special purpose. So it's used on occasion for special purpose. The ball, the baseball, football, the
Soccer, I mean,
soccer.
My God, I've seen hundreds, if not thousands of kids there recently.
Oh, sure, an event will have a lot of people. But the point of all the babble is just, if I had the buck, are there more sensitive flooding issues than Paquonic Point? May take, so it floods every now and then.
Yeah, I don't know that to be a
Well,
heavily
it's-
flooded area.
Yeah,
I mean,
it
it
was
makes sense, sort of, it's at the base of the hill and,
Yeah.
but I'm, you know,
You mainly see it
it gets too
just off
soggy
the
to
road.
play. It's at the-
Yeah.
Well, and it
Yeah,
just
beyond the
collects
gas.
water right
I
by the road
mean,
there.
my concern is not how it impacts the utility of those fields. My concern about it is that you have standing water for days, and now we're getting concerned about vector-borne diseases.
I don't think they have standing water for days.
Yes, they
I've
do.
seen
Yes,
standing
they
water
do.
for days.
Oh, yeah, they do.
Yes.
Yeah.
The main flooding area I see is just beyond the gas station, down there in that ravine sort of area. And I watch that come, I'm down there every day. And it stands there for a while.
Sort of under the trees when you go to
Yeah.
turn into the parking lot, that often, I mean, you can
No, that's
skate
water.
on it in the winter. It
That's
stays there
been
so long.
hugely exacerbated by all the
Well-
Fitch expansion and all of that. That
Yeah.
whole hillside was pretty much.
Do I have any good sense of how that all drains? I guess it just drains down or up. Doesn't drain.
I don't think it drains up.
Evap. Evap. But anyway, so that's an interesting one. They say flooding in terms of health effect.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
Yep.
the other thing that,
Vector-borne disease.
the other thing I like about this, I've told Megan, is that everybody drives by it, and
It's very visible.
it's very visible. And it will bring along a lot of people who are, so like, what's this climate stuff all about? Well, it affects what their kids do on ball fields. Whether it's a real effect or not, it's there for them to see it. And so it provides a potential, an educational opportunity. And if we can really deal with this from a basin point of view, hydrologically, then I think we've actually started to do, that starts to put us in a position where it can be done in other small basins in the town, of which we know there are flood problems, because you and I have driven to those
Sure.
In the strong 2010.
That's true.
See, we should get Megan Sydney's map of what was flooded in 2010.
So
That's-
Sydney's map actually comes out of the out of this, the town. Because as I understand, what happened was that after that 2010 flood, Public Works went around and said, yeah, this area here, and then they all actually put it on a map. So that map ought to be
I
available.
think I've seen it. I compiled a document as I was reading the various reports and things of descriptions and locations that people have identified flooding hazards. And I had one of them I noticed, I looked at today, like that I essentially transcribed locations based on a map. I think it's probably the
Okay.
map you're talking about.
Yeah.
And she
No, I
made it
agree.
sound like it didn't exist
Yeah, kind of.
otherwise, but,
You say it again?
oh, it just, when Sydney presented it to us, she made it sound like that was her bailiwick and her sort of,
Well, I mean, she may have something different, but I mean,
anyway.
I've seen that map.
But basically, I mean, it was pretty incredible what was flooded in town.
Sitting here wondering if there's also an opportunity to kind of create a virtual kind of circle with this. So if you think, we started off talking about heat issues and emergencies, and then you go into maybe how do you power, both the cooling stations or emergency stations that you're gonna have? Would it push you into more solar, into those areas, or establishing places where people can go to, people that are mobile, and make them part of also the emergency plan? I mean, I'm thinking the library and the high school, which are the two big places for our emergency plan in the area. And then, you think about access to water and, all that kind of knitting together a plan. It just makes me think about how well those places are set up to both withstand a flooding storm, heat event, and to provide the additional service that they would need to provide.
I remember reading in one of the reports that, right, although some of these facilities have generators, the generators are not big enough to cool the entire building if it was needed really in
Right.
like a hot summer heat
Right.
emergency compounded with power loss from whatever else.
I mean,
And I'm also thinking, I wonder on the waterfront, it just sort of takes off and it leads you all different places, but I'm thinking like, okay, so July and August have become very, very dry around here the last couple of years,
You bet.
very dry, very hot. Now, you have a certain number of people that aren't on city water and sewer, in the town. They're gonna be vulnerable to whether they lose a well and what happens there too. So I don't know what the town's responsibility is for that, to provide help.
Well, the town probably doesn't have any. If you're on private, you're on your own,
Probably
you're on a
not.
well, but
Yeah,
that doesn't mean that they shouldn't have some. I
right,
mean, that's sort of emergency services kind of a thing. I mean, strictly speaking, the town doesn't have any responsibility to provide me with electric power,
no,
but they can beat on Eversource and a few others to see to it that maybe they help me out with that. We're in partnership on that. This, do we know if there was a hydrologic study done for the town of Groton?
I don't.
I just wrote it down. I'll see what I can find. Because there's no question that we're getting flashier rains. You're gonna get
oh,
one.
gosh.
You're gonna get one tonight. And what does it mean in terms of flooding? Sometimes much, sometimes little. And then what does it mean in terms of access? How do you get from here to there? We can't get to the emergency centers or whatever it is.
I mean,
Dot.
here's an example, the Kalinowski School, which is a brand new fancy school on top of the hill there. You would think would be an ideal center for emergency management. Until you realize that the street in front there will flood. And then you get them there, but you can't bring anybody, so you don't want to use that.
Bring them by boat.
Yeah, well, no, but it's a problem.
I know.
You can check in, but you can never
You can
leave.
check in, but you can't check out. So I mean, but that's,
Isn't there a song about that? Is it something like the Eagles or somewhere?
It is, Hotel California.
Hotel California, there it is. Moving right along.
Right on to my final item C. Sorry, that was the timeline. So track 1 is due by November 10th. Track 2, they have a rolling submission deadline from the 21st.
So you're putting in a proposal for that planning stage, is that it?
I'm doing a proposal for each, so they're separate. One's going to be the
Oh, yeah,
climate
let me
action
track-
plan. The
this is
other is
track-
going to be
now,
Or track 1 and track 2, sorry.
correct. Yeah.
now, in this case, both of these will have to go before the town council, right?
At which stage?
Well, that, I'm not sure.
Mhm.
I think before the town can actually apply for a grant, and you'll need to check with John on this.
I had a conversation with John about this.
I think you have to tell the town council what you're doing, and they say, yeah, or they're gonna give you a 2-hour argument about,
We don't want money.
well,
No, they don't, they
No,
look at it in terms of
I
work.
know.
So I think no match is required for this.
I thought you said there was a match.
Yeah, I did too.
You said to access.
No, I said that you have to do a match. they were requiring you to do a match, what do they call it? Municipal match funding assessments.
Yeah.
That does not mean you have to give match money. What they are pushing is they came out with a resolution last year or so that said, Connecticut, you can do stormwater authorities and you can do all of these other things. They are really encouraging people to consider that. And one of the ways they are doing so is making you consider them through a municipal match funding assessment.
Well, be careful of
Whole
that.
separate- Whole separate conversation for
Yeah,
another
but
day.
be careful of, if you gotta take it to town council, then we need to be there to support you when that happens.
I do not think that I have to present this to the council prior to proposal,
Okay,
was the determination that
Okay.
we had made.
as long as you're clear, but I mean,
Yeah, well, I mean, if you were sitting on the council and you see this blah, blah about municipal assessment kind of a thing, say, what the hell is that? You know, something, do I or don't I? And you say, you don't, guaranteed. Okay, then don't even mention it. There's no matching
Yeah.
requirement.
Exactly.
Because if you give them the verbiage like this,
Oh,
this
gosh,
is
yeah, no,
meaningless.
if we did have to do a council presentation, it would be streamlined.
Take it as far along as you can. I think.
Right.
My last item was the Mystic Flood Study. So recent progress is that the Quality Assurance Project Plan was resubmitted to the EPA on September 26th. I've done some work on the Greater Groton project page that we're going to push back out through another social media post. The first steering committee, which Frank will be participating in, is Monday, October 17th. The first public workshop is Tuesday, November 1st at Union Baptist Church in downtown Mystic. There is a flyer that I will share for that. We're starting.
And what's
to
the
get
goal
speed.
of the workshop, Megan?
The workshop is, so it's the first of three. So this one is going to be spending probably the first component of it explaining what the project is to folks. Then we're going to have some guided conversations with people about their experience with flooding in Mystic, their concerns about flooding in Mystic, you know, all of the kind of like, this is what we're living in, this is our ideas for it. And then we're going to be coming back, explaining next steps, the property surveys that GZA will do and all of those sorts of things, ways that people can stay, you know, in communication about the project, kind of where we're going from here.
Without trying to be a pain, as we're sitting here among
Yes.
friends, the answer to that question is, to some extent, that will be discussed during the first steering committee meeting on Monday.
Mhm.
Because I think the steering committee needs to know what the project is. And then with that, what it is needs to be obtained from the community.
So
Just-
the steering committee meeting was strategically scheduled so that it will inform the first public workshops.
Okay, sounds good.
and can you tell us who's on the steering committee now?
It's not changed since last time you talked. We haven't had another internal meeting.
Okay.
So as it currently stands, although Zal has some ideas, it is a couple of folks representing different departments within the town. So Mark Berry from Parks, Greg Hanover from DPW, a representative, Delia D. Morrison from Finance, hopefully Captain B from Emergency Management. And then we invited Jim O'Donnell from Circa. We, of course, have Frank as a representative of this task force. We have Todd Brady representing both local business owner and historical district commission, and Chad Frost as, again, local business owner with,
Architect,
architectural understanding and knowledge.
A lot of work in downtown. And he was part of the search committee that selected GZA.
I missed something?
My husband used to manage one GCA's office, so I
Oh.
just made the good company.
Yeah.
Okay,
No conflicts of interest around you.
No, at least we disclose them.
I don't
Sounds
think
like a
anyone
great
would
committee.
consider him a conflict.
Pardon?
It's a great committee.
it's a good committee.
They'll have some criticisms, but that's okay. I'll take it back to the group.
I what?
I said, you have a few criticisms, but that's constructive criticism that we'll take back to the group. Yeah,
Well
Okay.
done.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Fabulous.
Okay, stop share.
thank you. The bright red box in the top. Okay, we're back to it.
And
okay, so,
Moving right along.
moving right along, any other comments about this?
Oh, no, sounds great.
Okay, so, you need to let me know, Megan, when you think you've got more on your plate you can handle. I mean, if there's other projects that are starting to, you're gonna start to think about, then by all means, we'll come on the schedule so you can share them with a group.
I'm hoping next time we meet, I might have an update. So I talked with Amy Thompson from UConn yesterday. UConn has a partnership with Eversource where they will assist you with benchmarking. Obviously, we've done benchmarking 2010, updated in 2018. We need to get into a system where we are doing it on a regular basis, taking a look at our, energy efficiency and our building energy use. So I unfortunately was supposed to meet with Rick Norris a couple weeks ago and we had to cancel last minute. But I'm hoping to get time in his schedule to kind of figure out what he's doing on the public school side and figure out a game plan. And it'll be definitely something to discuss with you all, because I know you've been involved in those previous benchmarking. So preliminarily, I think that would be a good agenda topic, but.
And are you, where are you with sort of, working with the item you brought to us last time, which is the, action plan for, climate change?
It's up there.
That was, yeah, the track one proposal, the climate action plan,
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
planned by a different name, yeah. We just standardize how we're
Great
talking about these.
Great progress, honestly.
Oh, thank you.
I think I have the benefit of missing the last, so it's like, I'm just bowled over really. And
Oh, thank
you've
you.
done a tremendous amount of work.
Well, haven't been here last month. She's done a tremendous amount of work in one
No,
month.
I can see that.
Let me 25 words or less. 25 words or less on this distressed community business.
What it means.
We are or we aren't, and we are defined. It's all, that's done. Okay,
That's state statute.
right. So that was to the
It
good.
has to do with income level and.
Yeah, sure. All the rest of it. The question I had was, because there are some things that haven't been done.
Right.
Whether this was done, it's done.
Is that something that we should just, for our own information, know more about?
Yeah, I think so. I knew nothing about it. I said, what the hell's a distressed community?
And there are different definitions for different state programs.
Different, that's right, that's the problem.
Schools and on.
Because we were
So
distressed,
Funding things there, we're not in the category that New Haven is in.
Right.
Bridgeport, right.
Or Bridgeport.
Right.
But we are in terms of other parts, and I can certainly bring definitions if you want.
so say it again?
Well,
Jesse has the definitions
they're
if
in
we
state
want
Oh,
to.
okay.
we can just sort of see what's
Yeah.
considered.
Because presumably it means something to us in terms of gifts, grants and donations or whatever.
Right, exactly,
Yeah,
very much so.
So this application form, there's 2 mappers they had you consult, and we qualify as being in the targeted area for both, but I'll send, they're online mappers, so I can send to you.
Okay,
Thank you. 25 words.
okay,
Isn't that then?
okay, moving on to old business.
Yeah,
Okay, so, I put on here, the, feasibility training update. It's going slowly. And, they're being very tight, holding things very tight to the chest. I think it turns out, to be that in part, DOT is so understaffed that they're being asked to do many things that require big things, and it just leave me alone, don't talk to me because I got to do my report kind of thing. I hope that's what it's about, because I've been around government long enough to know that when you get this, well, I can't tell you what's going on, then something's going And I hope that's not the case, but anyhow, that's generally my feeling about that. We had a very good, the Connecticut Commuter Rail Council had a meeting 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, because it was, where the Rail Council wanted to hear about what's going on with the Shoreline East generally, from all the way from New Haven all the way to New London, and then more specifically about what was going on with the feasibility study. The DOT showed up and I think did a reasonable job about explaining what's going on with Shoreline East and some stuff that I actually learned myself. Like, well, we're talking about our systems and how they all integrate. And I mean, they're into the nuts and bolts of it in a way that I wasn't aware of. And then they did an outline of what they're doing with the feasibility study. And there were some interesting comments, like one of the DOT folks said, well, we weren't funded to do that last year. And the chairman of the Appropriations Committee got up and said at the very end of the meeting, just for the record, we funded everything you asked for. And it was sort of like,
Yeah.
I mean, it was not subtle. So I don't know, that's going to be interesting to see how that goes forward. There is going to be some public meetings coming up in November, which I would hope that we might rally a bunch of people to go around to go to that. That's all I've got on that. I'm happy to at some point do a PowerPoint for you guys, but not tonight.
What's going on with Shoreline East to Westerly? I thought they extended all that.
No. That's part of this feasibility study.
Okay.
There's two parts to the feasibility study. One is to extend Shoreline East from New London to Westerly. That's part one. Part two is to then connect up Norwich to Electric Boat and Pfizer, and that's a establishment of a new, what's in the terms of Connecticut branch line, and connect the two of them in Groton. And so they're going through a painstaking process of looking at
Needing a career study.
a career study
Slow.
of population projections, job, and it goes on and on and on. And then I've asked they make sure they look at this compared to what the traffic on highways look like. And I don't get a good response about that, because that's really what the alternative is, to how do you get from point A to point B.
Is there anything going on in our area that hasn't been at times around biking?
Yeah.
A bike,
Yeah.
you know, a
Part of-
dedicated. So I mean, there's such an opportunity in this area with the amount of tourism traffic we have, with being able to bike to work through those big
Part
employers.
of this study is to look at transit,
Yeah,
and that includes walking and biking to train stations. And so if this is done right, and I don't have a good sense of that,
yeah,
it'll include that. For example, right now, under state law, TOD, transit oriented development, is within a half mile of the radius of the station. And that works for your walking. But your radius is much bigger if you're on an electric bike,
Yeah.
or on a bicycle, or on an electric scooter. So they have to really come to grips with that, and they haven't yet. And then the transit, that is the bus system here, is unbelievably
Abstract.
abstract. You can't, I mean, it's not connected up. It tends to be very localized. And
Well, the other one is, I think there's a bus that runs by my door on some sort of a schedule that gets pretty close to Avery Point every day.
How
And
do you
I don't
find
have
out?
any idea what it is.
Well, one of the things that came out in this commuter rail thing about Shoreline East was the lack of connection between the Shoreline East schedules and the local bus schedules. So
Right,
people get dropped in Westbrook and, you know, the bus that would take them home comes 2 hours later, right?
Yeah. So this is, it's just gonna be very interesting to see how this thing goes together. What I'm worried about is they've gotten so far into this without having anything, you know, in writing on the table. But we'll see. Okay, next topic, unless you have other questions about that. The next topic is a meeting with the Groton Town Council, which Bert has asked me once, middle of the summer, was I ready to go in the following meeting? And I said, not until you hire Megan, then I'll be ready to talk. And now we've hired Megan, and so I'm still not quite ready to talk until I think until we think it's ready. And part of my concern there is that I don't want to go to a meeting with the town council and having them unload on us and Megan that they want us to do all of the following things, which may have nothing to do with climate change and resiliency or in sustainability.
What's the chances of that?
Oh, our town council? High probability.
Well, that's not why.
What did they ask us to do before? What if?
Well, pardon?
Never asked us.
Well, they've never asked us to do that, but now they got someone here who actually works for them. Remember, we don't work for them. Okay, there's a difference. And I don't want to end up jeopardizing, screwing up a something we've got started and it's taken a long time to get it going. So,
Well, let's not get in Megan's way. I mean, she's doing a great job. How would they not? And I guess you've lived in Groton longer than I have, or know the town council better than I do. But we don't want to run interference.
Is there
That's
any-
important.
Urgency about our going.
there doesn't seem to be,
Well, there is,
well,
or there was.
It was.
We don't know. I don't know what our
I
role
mean,
is.
at some point, the town council, right, did the work of approving the proposal, approved the job description, approved. I mean, if I were the town council, I would want to hear from Megan after she's been enrolled 3 to 4 months and say, wow, you
Yeah,
know, we
exactly.
hired you, what you up to?
No, break. We gotta be, in my estimation, and I don't know the town council and neither does anybody else. Okay? Remember, we were appointed by a town council that was in existence in 2019 and left virtually en masse in 21. And the concern I had was that, and we made a couple of presentations, I made a couple of presentations standing in front of these folks that didn't have any idea who the Groton Resilience and Sustainability Task Force is. You could tell it by their eyes. This is the new council, and it was a data center issue, okay? And we reminded them of what they had talked about in terms of climate and the rest of it, and what the blank wall. Introducing ourselves again to the latest town council was the issue. To find out just where they stand on some of these issues and what we can do for them to help them with those issues. That was the purpose of meeting with this town council.
Well, and I
And
thought
it
to
all-
reconstitute this group
Yeah.
as not as a task force, but as an
Oh,
advisory.
that was another.
well, I think
That's quite right.
that's something that we're concerned about. Not clear they even thought about that.
Well, how do we find that out?
Or maybe
Do
we
we
need to
care?
tell them.
Do we care?
We may not care, right, but how?
Well, I think when we go before them, we better have thought about that.
Yeah, we better have thought about that.
Well, I mean, so that was, I just tell you that,
I
that
actually
was the
think we
reason.
need to have a conversation. about it.
Yeah, we could have a conversation. It seems to me that it's up to, the burden falls on us to meet with them and then tell them how we see our role now that we've hired Megan, and
That's right.
and then we can
And what
define it.
makes
I don't think
sense.
anybody would question it. We haven't been thinking about it. We actually have a little bit of history now. and-
Right.
Well, and I think Megan
Some
and John
traction.
need to think about it.
Yeah, and
Well,
how
that's-
can we best serve you, or what
Yeah.
can we do? How can we help not be in the way? You know, I think that's.
Well, that was the purpose of going to the council. this is also a purpose of the going to the council. If it's premature and if we hear back from John and Megan, sort of a thing, but
I think you
we're
should,
ready to fish, go fishing or cut bait.
I agree.
Okay,
I think you
I mean-
should decide whether you think you want to go in front of them.
Let's say it again.
I think you should decide whether you think you want to go in front of them.
Well, we may get invited in a way that we have to show up. So I'm,
So you said you would get a response at the end of November on the first one, is that right?
these are the proposals?
Yeah.
And leave them out. This-
No, I'm actually thinking that if
Yeah, those are a
you want
positive.
to want to wow the town council with, I mean, if you don't have to go to them for approval, apply for it.
Yeah.
You know, meeting with them in December when there's actually been more progress on the Mystic, downtown Mystic study, sort of, you know, that whole
Couple
process
grants
is
coming
going,
in,
you know, maybe you started the process with sort of assessing whether it's TNC doing it or something else. And then, and by the way, you know, we will have this summer intern working on X, Y, or Z, and we as a task force would like to propose, and I think you're absolutely right, Sarah, that we need to decide that ourselves. Do we want to continue in an advisory role? Do you want us to
Do you want
continue to do that, or would you
Right.
like us to get out of your hair?
Yeah.
and that kind of thing, but that's a
Exactly.
conversation. And, you know, this is October. I don't think there's any need to be thinking about anything before December town council.
But you have to lay the foundation of who thinks what, I
Right,
guess.
right, no, but at
Well,
our
that's the
next
whole-
meeting, we should,
that's why it's on here,
that we should have. a
because we need to have
discussion
that
about-
foundation
With
laid.
your input, I think, you know, how
Well,
you see us being most helpful to you.
Or not.
Or not. And no, seriously, you know, because up until you got here, it was just us. And so that's different now. And
It's just us and everybody else going, huh? What are you talking about, huh?
I'm gonna state my opinion. I don't see that. And I think the most logical thing to do is for Megan to have a direct link, as she has already established with Victor, into the legislative health district. That provides you with all the planning you need for health orientation and issues. And my role is done, and so is Victor's. We've done the job of putting together what was there. It needs to be updated via the legislative district. You're on it. You got a great set of topics. And I don't feel like I contribute beyond that of what we assemble. There are people that you can be in direct contact with that are doing that work on a day-to-day basis. I'll have a contemporary knowledge of it. So that's my opinion,
Mhm.
Well,
because the role is done.
I would
feel that
argue
way
that-
about the environmental stuff, and you certainly have me, and you have Frank and other people that you could call on, or that will
Yeah,
know
I'd be
you
happy
can
to
call on.
Real.
Yeah, and I think that for us to get here and then sort of like, I don't know, I just feel like it's almost running interference.
Well, I guess
You have an ongoing project.
Yeah.
You have a different thing going on.
I know, and that's true, except I would argue that what you said is true about the health,
Right.
but I would argue that you're a particularly important person to sit in on these kind of conversations for other issues, because you have a perspective the rest of us don't have. That is from having
In business.
exactly, and I think that's really important. I think Jesse has a perspective that is government, and you have a perspective.
But I think that's not
So-
perhaps a monthly meeting. That's perhaps hey, I'm thinking about this. Maybe it's a quarterly thing or whatever, where
Well, that's
here's
fine.
what we're laying out.
But
and that's
I
fine.
would-
I'm happy to do whatever is helpful,
Right.
but
Well,
I
it has
don't
to be
think it's
helpful.
helpful.
Well, it has to be helpful.
We don't want to make, I don't want to make our
More work.
committee be more work and more sort of.
Exactly.
bureaucracy for
I agree.
And we've been very careful about that,
Yeah.
I think.
even this meeting. And
Well,
this was
so
hugely
maybe
helpful.
we should have a more robust conversation next time.
I think you should take us out to
Or have a
lunch.
special meeting.
Take a shot.
Have a special meeting.
Okay, Kelly. we're gonna have lunch.
We have a party, a celebration.
Isn't that how people went to jail or something? You want to go to Kentucky?
I want to go.
I want to go to the Kentucky Derby.
And I want to stay in a five-star hotel.
Okay, Noah's for breakfast.
You're a tough.
Oh,
girl.
yeah, let's go to
That
James.
was breakfast.
Go over to Stony.
All right, moving right along, because
Yeah.
Mickey Weiss has a gala tonight.
Yeah.
And we
So
are
we
all,
wanna go.
he has a tie in his pocket, and I gotta put my tie on.
Ah, right.
The hazard mitigation plan that we heard about at Circa the other night, with the report that's due in a couple of weeks or something like that, he said. Are we getting close to that?
I haven't heard anything back. We will be receiving a draft of that report. It will come through, John and Greg Hanover, and John said he'll disseminate it to Deb and me and Dave Prescott, who's with us now, who has a fantastic coastal background.
That's something we should look at.
It's for your town.
The original one.
Your town is,
Oh, yeah. Well,
your town is having consultants produce it or whatever.
yeah.
I think you probably should look at it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, other business, other suggestions
Not for the moment.
besides a free breakfast?
I know. Breakfast and Noah's.
Yeah, it changes my perspective on why we won't go to the town council.
Okay.
I was operating under something of the old model,
Right.
Okay.
which is no longer.
Anything else, Megan, you have that you? Okay. Maggie, you,
No, I'm good.
All right, I motion that we adjourn.
Seconded.
all those in favor? Aye.
It's inverted. this time.
Yeah, that's.
That's the inverted.
I just figured I'll put one of your names.